Hello everybody. We're gonna talk in this video about some of the applications of the of mass transfer in our daily life and in industry. And I believe this is important because it gives us an understanding of what why mass transfer is important, and it gives us an idea of how things are happening around us and how mass transfer is involved in many of the things that take place around us every day. One of the examples is the very famous example of dissolving salt or sugar in water. So what happens is if you put sugar in water and leave it for a long time, it's gonna dissolve totally or until the water is saturated. And you can speed up the process if you stir it or if you use hot water instead of cold water. And this happens because the concentration of the salt or the sugar in water is less than the saturation concentration, so it can dissolve more salt or more sugar until it's fully saturated. So this is one thing that we see almost every day. The second is the dots or the drops of water that spontaneously form on cold surfaces when the day is humid or when the temperature is very low. And this is due to the saturation of air with water, and water cannot stay in air, so it deposits on surfaces spontaneously. And it's not all the air components that do this, it's only water. And it's the basis of many of the processes that are related to humidification or dehumidification of air, which are basically a mass transfer operations. One other thing is something that we see a lot, which is these small white bags. If you buy a new pair of shoes or a new bag or new clothes, we find these bags inside the clothes. And this is, as it's said here, it says desiccant. And desiccant is something that absorbs water or adsorbs water. So it takes the water vapor from air so that it prevents the clothes or the shoes or the bags from getting bad or having something bad happen to it while it's being kept for a long time without use. So this is one other thing that selectively takes or absorbs water vapor from air. One other example is the drying of clothes, and this is something that we see every day. When you have clothes or wet clothes, you hang them so that they are exposed to air, and the water will evaporate from the clothes and go to the air. And this is because the air contains water vapor, but it's not a lot of water vapor, so water will go from the clothes to the air. And this is why you see that the clothes will take longer time to dry if it's a humid day, because the water vapor in air is at higher concentration, so the rate of mass transfer is not going to be high. Another example is a very famous example, which is the coffee. And the same applies to tea and any hot drinks that we drink. And what happens is that we have hot water or hot milk, and we make it extract the flavor from coffee or from the tea or any other hot drink. And this is a process that's called solid liquid extraction, and it is a pure mass transfer operation. So this is one other example. Another example is the perfumes. We use perfumes because they diffuse in air and they spread the good smell everywhere around us. So this is like a very famous example of mass transfer. There are many examples of mass transfer in our bodies. One of them is the hemoglobin that takes the oxygen from the air and gives it to our body, and then takes carbon dioxide from our bodies and releases it back to the air. And this is a very selective process. It does not take any other components other than oxygen and carbon dioxide, and it is very efficient process. Actually, there are many mind-blowing things that take place inside our bodies. Another example is our kidneys that take or purify our blood from the toxins and from the impurities that are produced during the burning of food in our body. and these things are kicked out of the body, and the blood is kept as it is. So we don't lose any of our blood with the urine or with the stool. So these things are very, or the kidney is very, very small, yet it's an extremely efficient part of our body. And you might have heard of the alternative for people who have issues with their kidneys or malfunctioning kidneys. They have to go through a dialysis process where the blood is all the blood of the body is taken out and then go through this machine to get rid of all the toxins, and then it's returned back to the body. It's a very, very tiring process, very painful process, and it's not as efficient as this small kidney that we have in our body. So it's a magnificent thing if you think about this. So this is a pure mass transfer process as well. If we think of mass transfer in industry, we will see a lot of things, and we have already mentioned some of them before. But it's good to revisit this one more time. So one of the very famous mass transfer based operations is the distillation process, and you'll see that most of them are gonna be separation processes. So distillation is a process where we have two components or more, and these components have different boiling points. So we pass them by different stages where the liquid phase is interacting with the gas phase, and the mass transfer takes place. So the gas phase gets more rich in the more volatile component, and the liquid phase gets more rich in the less volatile component. So, and we start with one stream and we end up with two streams with totally different compositions. Each one of them is richer in one of the two components. In another example we have is the absorption and stripping. And in absorption and stripping, we know that we have a gas stream that contains gases that we need and some impurities. So to get rid of these impurities, we use a solvent that contacts the liquid and absorbs. It has a high affinity to absorb this impurity from the gas phase, and then the gases come out from this column or the absorber, a clean gas. And this solvent is then directed to a stripper where the operating conditions are reversed, and then we can get rid of this impurity from the gas, from the solvent, and regenerate the solvent to produce a fresh solvent that can be used again to do the absorption process. So this is again one more mass transfer process. One of the famous processes as well is the cooling towers. It's not a separation process, but it's a mass transfer based process. The cooling tower is used to cool down the water that the utility water that's used in chemical plants, and that has been used to cool other processes. So it absorbs the heat and its temperature increased. So to cool it down, we use the cooling tower where air is coming from the bottom to the top, from down up, and the air is going from up to down, where it's like a fall or spray, whatever the shape of the water going from up to down. And this contact between air and water leads to evaporation of some of the water, and this water, it takes out heat from the rest of the water that we have. So it's a very, very simple yet an efficient way of cooling the water, and it only depends on basics of mass transfer. One other example is the drying of solids. It's either for, in the case of ceramics, which are originally clay material that has been shaped to take the desired shape, and this shape is or these dry clays are dried. The wet clay is dried so that the water leaves it, and it ends up to be a solid material. The same is the case for dried fruits. So there are many fruits that can be dried and can be kept for a long time. One of them is raisins, which is originally grapes, and this grapes is dried the same way the ceramic materials are dried, and the dried grapes are used in, or the raisins are used in many other things. So this is one other mass transfer process. One last thing that we're going to mention is the crystallization of salt, and this applies to salt and to sugar as well. So the salt is originally available in seawater, and this salt is produced by drying or evaporating the water from the sea. So it's like big, very big and shallow baths of water, of seawater are prepared, and the water is left to evaporate, so that the concentration of salt increases a lot. So it's a saturated or super saturated solution, and the salt can be produced from this process very efficiently. The same thing for the sugar production. The sugar is produced from sugar cane or sugar beets, and this produces a solution that contains a high concentration of salt. Again, the water is evaporated until it's saturated, and the crystals of sugar are crystallized and produced from this process. So these are some of the applications of mass transfer in our daily life and in industry. Starting next video, we are going to start with the contents of the course, which are the contents in chapter 22 in the textbook. And in this chapter, or in the next video, we'll see or know more details about the concentration, since the concentration is the driving force, or the concentration gradient is the driving force. We will talk more about concentrations and agree on some of the terminology and of the symbols that we will be using in the rest of the course. So I'll see you then, inshallah. Goodbye.